your half-sister, has just lost a $100 million Netflix contract. What do you think?
Now, and just her latent anger underneath every... Call her Meghan Markle instead of, it's Sussex now.
For what? To watch? Who wants to watch Meghan Markle bake a pie?
For years, public conversation surrounding Meghan Markle followed a familiar pattern. It was loud, polarized, emotionally charged. Every appearance sparked reaction, every statement produced debate. And every project seemed to divide audiences into camps of defenders and critics. The volume never dipped. Until suddenly, it did. Before any talk of backlash. Before accusations of failure or success entered the conversation, something far subtler took place. The conversation didn't explode. It didn't fracture. It simply slowed down and then drifted away. When Meghan Markle's latest Netflix project premiered, the industry didn't witness outrage or widespread rejection. There was no viral backlash cycle, no coordinated criticism, no urgent attempts at reframing the narrative. Instead, the response was muted. The show arrived, existed briefly in public view, and then quietly slipped from the center of attention in the streaming world. That kind of reaction is more unsettling than criticism. Platforms are built to manage controversy. They know how to respond when projects divide audiences or provoke strong reactions. What they struggle with is indifference. A project that fails loudly can be adjusted, defended, or repositioned. A project that fails quietly offers nothing to respond to. Industry observers noticed the absence immediately. Not because viewership numbers were catastrophic or reviews unusually harsh, but because the emotional temperature never rose. There was no urgency to explain the show's purpose. No wave of commentary defending its relevance. No push to contextualize its themes or sharpen its messaging. It didn't crash. It cooled. And that distinction matters. In entertainment, decline rarely announces itself with spectacle. It doesn't arrive with dramatic press releases or public acknowledgments. It arrives through silence. Conversations move on. Meetings stop including the project. Promotion remains technically present but loses intensity. Eventually, the work becomes something no one actively volunteers to discuss. That process had begun, behind the scenes. People close to the platform described a sense of disengagement rather than disappointment. Not rejection, just a gradual emotional withdrawal. Projects that inspire belief generate internal momentum. They are protected, refined, defended. This one wasn't. The promotional engine didn't accelerate. Messaging didn't evolve. No senior voices stepped forward to frame the project as culturally necessary. It simply existed, then faded into administrative territory. Viewers struggled to articulate what felt missing. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even dissatisfaction in the traditional sense. Many described the experience as strangely effortful. Episodes felt longer than expected. Emotional beats didn't linger. Interest dissipated before curiosity fully took hold. Some critics described the series as emotionally flat. Not provocative, not illuminating, not offensive, just inert. A project that felt complete before it began. Offering conclusions without leaving space for discovery. That reaction unsettled industry insiders more than negative reviews ever could. What troubled them wasn't whether audiences liked the content, but how quickly conversations stopped revolving around it. Momentum vanished almost immediately. The show didn't challenge audiences or confront them. It failed to demand emotional participation. The quiet question that replaced all others was simple. Who is this for right now? No convincing answer emerged, as that question lingered. Royal biographer Tom Bower offered a perspective that reframed the discussion entirely. Rather than challenging sincerity or intent, he focused on something more elusive: emotional timing. According to Bower, the issue was never whether the emotions presented were genuine. It was how they were delivered. Carefully paced, smoothly packaged, fully contextualized before the audience had time to encounter them naturally. Authenticity, he suggested, isn't measured by truth alone. It's measured by imperfection, by hesitation, by unresolved moments that invite the audience into uncertainty rather than guiding them toward conclusions. When vulnerability arrives fully polished, audiences don't push back loudly. They retreat quietly. Viewers didn't question whether the emotions were real. They questioned why they were being presented this way, why everything felt pre-processed, why each emotional beat arrived neatly framed, already interpreted, already resolved. Nothing lingered. Nothing unsettled. Nothing demanded reflection after the episode ended. That subtle shift altered perception entirely. What might have felt introspective instead came across as instructional. Vulnerability delivered like a finished argument loses its power to connect at the same time. Public commentary began to question the underlying premise. The assumption that association with royalty automatically confers cultural authority no longer resonated the way it once did. Audiences weren't hostile. They were unconvinced. There were no debates. No think pieces fighting opposing sides. People didn't argue, they scrolled. For a streaming platform built on retention and engagement, that response is fatal. Algorithms can amplify outrage. They can promote controversy. They can't optimize indifference. When that happens, platforms don't react publicly. They pause internally. Development slows. Conversations shift elsewhere. And once a system stops asking what's next, it has already moved on. This wasn't about ratings alone. It was about relevance thinning quietly, while this emotional cooling played out in the streaming landscape. A very different scene unfolded in a courtroom. When Prince Harry appeared to testify, expectations were procedural. Observers anticipated legal arguments, timelines, evidence. Instead, what emerged felt personal and uncontained. His testimony didn't sound like a strategic legal performance. It sounded layered, as though years of unresolved grievance had found a setting that couldn't edit, soften, or redirect it. He wasn't simply answering questions. He was reliving experiences. Each response carried emotional weight beyond the case itself, and that weight landed awkwardly in a space designed for precision. Not catharsis. At one point, the judge intervened, reminding him to focus on facts rather than characterization. The moment was brief but revealing, not dramatic but instructive. There were no cutaways, no framing music, no narrative voice-guiding interpretation, just unfiltered emotion in a setting that demanded restraint. For the first time in a long while, emotion wasn't curated. Coverage shifted almost immediately. Commentary moved away from legal strategy and towards something more complex. The sense that this moment wasn't about winning or losing. It was about unresolved history surfacing where it could no longer be shaped. That contrast raised an uncomfortable question. If this is what uncontained emotion looks like, what had everything else been? The question lingered without resolution. Back on the streaming side, viewers began noticing absences rather than accusations. No acknowledgement of known tensions. No visible pauses to address fractures that hovered just outside the narrative frame. Emotion appeared carefully compartmentalized, offered only where control could be maintained. Audiences don't expect full transparency. They understand boundaries. But when a narrative promises intimacy while sidestepping its most destabilizing elements, trust erodes quietly, not through outrage, through reinterpretation. Moments that once felt warm began to feel selective, not manipulative, but strategic. And public perception responds more to contrast than explanation. By the time critics articulated these concerns, most viewers had already felt them instinctively. Something wasn't missing accidentally. Something had been stepped around deliberately. Across interviews, memoirs, and long-form projects, a pattern emerged. Personal revelations released at precise intervals. Emotional disclosures framed carefully. Then, silence. Nothing spontaneous. Nothing unresolved. That precision became the problem. Audiences don't reject vulnerability because it's excessive. They pull away when it starts to feel scheduled. When emotion arrives polished instead of tentative, empathy shuts down quietly. Not in protest, but in self-protection. Each new release felt